So with that, I'll leave it to Lori, who obviously knows her stuff.
But not since the 40s. So I think what you were referring to, well, but the Sierra Club has been around since the 40s.
Yes, you made that clear.
And we actually got started protecting the Torrey Pines. And also, it's too bad Bruce left, he mentioned Marston and Marston's vision for San Diego. And the Sierra Club has really built on that vision, going back to the founding of the chapter here. The 5th oldest chapter. We were number 5 chapter in the country of the Sierra Club. It's right here in San Diego. So there's really quite a legacy. And I got involved, as I've been listening to the prior speakers, I got involved with the Sierra Club because I was working on water issues, pretty much freelance. I was living back and forth across the border at the time, and I started hearing about this wastewater treatment plant that was under development. And it just seemed, the more I got involved, somebody asked me to look at this 3-inch thick EIS, which the federal government had put out. And parts of it looked very promising, and parts of it just looked absurd. And that was how I got involved with understanding just how government can all the time. And that's when the staff, the people that are working in the offices on your behalf, become even more vitally important, because they are maintaining that vision while you're out there. Frankly, when I talk to my friends back in Washington, the speaker, just like in Sacramento, says you have to raise this much money. Doesn't matter if you're not being challenged in the next election. You have to raise that money. It's kind of like being in a big church. You have to give it to, put it in the collection plate when it gets passed around. And the issue of money in politics is something that affects every interest, and it's coming to bear clearly on this election in big ways. But in terms of the environment, we have real assets. When people, the business interests talk about protecting their investments and their assets, I really think environmentalists need to counter that, and conservationists and preservationists, we need to counter that by saying there are biological resource assessments that we are not fully analyzing. If we did an assessment of what the natural environment means to our economy in San Diego, it would probably blow the socks off of a lot of other industries that are here. And we know that it's so important when we don't have water. We know, and going back to 20 years ago, the plan that I first got involved in, it was a cross-border wastewater treatment plant. Guess which city on the border is now going to zero discharge, reusing the majority of their water. Their goal is zero discharge into the ocean, maximizing their water resources to the point where they don't have to dump it out to sea. They put it back into landscaping. They put it back into other uses. Guess which city on the border is doing that? It's not San Diego, folks. It's Tijuana. And they did that thanks to government investments from the United States as well. I was a Clinton appointee on a cross-border board that put money into environmental infrastructure as part of NAFTA. So when you think long-term, I think back 20 years, and I think of where we are today. Mexico got it. San Diego, unfortunately, didn't. How do we use federal funds? How do we invest money? And where are we going to be in the next 20 years? The good news is that they're investing. San Diego City and County is now giving rebates. If you take turf out of your yard, they actually will give you money to help offset that. We need to be more like Australia and other places. We need to mandate that if you build a new structure, you need to be able to capture rainwater. You need to be able to store it. You need to have a three-way pipe, not just purple pipes for reclaimed water. We need to have three-way pipes where we are using rainwater in residential buildings. We need to start really looking around the world, looking at Germany and their solar, but looking at other countries that are dealing with climate change and how they deal with water. And we really need a mayor and leadership overall that have a global vision and are learning from people around the world that have some really clever, bright things going on. And you don't have to go across the oceans, you just can go right across the border fence, and you can find some really important ideas that make sense in this region. So I think that we've had elected officials in San Diego who are in the crazy musical chairs aspect of where do I go from here. One of the folks who was here, I didn't see David speak this evening. I was at an event with him earlier today. I have endorsed him, and I think that he is a very interesting young man who didn't plan to run for mayor, unlike some other candidates that are in this race. And I think in some ways that makes him a better choice, because he is doing this for some really compelling reasons. coming from a community that hasn't been well represented. And the environmental degradation of that community is a warning for all of us who care about air quality and sick kids and asthma and all those things that happen in a community that here in Claremont, where I grew up, is the first planned community in San Diego. The houses here are within walking distance, though we don't walk enough, but within walking distance of a community center, a library, a swimming pool. There is a stark divide between the planning that has taken place in the northern area of San Diego and the southern area of San Diego. And we need to unify and get that planning into all areas of San Diego. And that's the kind of vision that I think our next mayor needs to be looking out for. So we need to build not just a bench, we need to build a strong layer. For every elected official, as Nicole was saying, you have to have that person, a good person, a group of good people pushing buttons when the votes come up. But more importantly, you need to have a groundswell of people that are keeping them focused on what is important, and then good professional staff that will stay there for years and years and years and years and decades. And that's where a lot of us have been, unfortunately, outplayed. But it's great to see it's great to see Rob in the mayor's office for a while. It's great to see Nicole there for years with Donna and now with Todd. It's very important that we get those good, skilled staff people in there into City Hall, in there into Sacramento, into the county building, because they will keep that vision going, even as those of us who are electeds are getting kicked out by the term limit musical chair game. So that's my perspective, coming from the long term of being an activist for decades, but also from being in office. It's a short time that you have to make a difference. And if we really want to make sure we have good environmental perspective, we need to have not just a bench of people running for office, but a strong, broad coalition of people that are working for them, not only helping them get into office, but then being there to keep their visions going through all the layers of bureaucracy that is local and state and every level of government. And that's the only way in a state like California, which is in the top 10, I don't know where we are ranked right now, but in this state, what we do here in San Diego will make a difference in the world. And likewise, conversely, we have to learn from what the rest of the world is doing. Because there's a lot to model on that is going very well. And I think sometimes our leaders have not been good at responding to those opportunities, and we can learn from other places that have.
Thank you, Laurie. I'm Alan Ball. My capacity here today is not representing the California Center for Sustainable Energy, which I chair. That's kind of a public service requirement of the chair of that organization, is to make sure that I clarify that I don't represent them in my personal comments. I came here to learn today. I was really happy to have Kathleen invite me because it gives me a good excuse to come and learn about what I consider to be a deadly serious matter. Climate change and the impacts that it will have on each of us and our future generations is probably the most important issue that we will deal with in our lifetimes. Unfortunately, we don't have a huge buy-in on that premise from an awful lot of people, including a lot of politicians, a lot of business and corporate interests and development interests. And while I see all that changing slowly, it hasn't been fast enough to seriously impact the speed of climate change. I don't know how many of you had the chance to see a recent National Geographic with the Statue of Liberty underwater, but it's pretty compelling evidence that bad things could happen. The maps of what the geography of San Diego would look like in 100 years wouldn't recommend that you invest in Coronado or Mission Beach if you plan to pass that on to your heirs, unless they are divers or something like that. So I was relating to Kathleen earlier that I thought an awful lot about this opportunity to learn today, and trying to put together what my vision of the future would be. And the first thing I would say is, don't stop doing what you're doing, because every piece of work, that important work that all of you do every day, needs to continue. And so I think while some of the information that we receive is not such good news, stopping the fight for a stabilized and sustainable future would not be a very good move. Bill and his team have been working on CCA for quite some time, and they make some really great progress. My hats off to you, to Crystal, for all the good work they're doing. Just in a word, I would tell you this. During the time I was employed at Qualcomm, I negotiated essentially a CCA contract for Qualcomm in a private sector. It's referred to as direct access and not CCA, but it's the same, basically the same exact thing. And some of the cities and universities around San Diego also entered into those kinds of contracts. Unfortunately, for political reasons, they mostly bailed out of those contracts when the energy crisis hit, because they were getting ridiculously large bills because they unfortunately negotiated ridiculous contracts. They didn't really put the mental energy into it that was required, and I congratulate Bill and Lane, yeah, I'm sorry, Lane, I just escaped me. The energy they're putting into this CCA effort, because it can work, but it's not simple or easy, and it does require educating yourself about the energy market before you can effectively do it. And I know you guys are doing that, so that's good. So there's lots of positive things that I see going on. Interesting, and to my mind, extremely positive. For years and years and years, the utilities convinced us that we needed San Onofre, and convinced us to spend literally hundreds of billions of dollars. It's been gone for, what, year and a half, something like that? Yeah. We've been through a summer, 2 summers, I guess. We've been through 2 summers. There hasn't been a single electric emergency declared that I'm aware of anyway. While San Onofre was online, we had 3 or 4. So how do you figure that? That's a toughie. And now they want the ratepayers to pay to dismantle it, which seems, once again, the utilities sold the concept. Why do we have to undo their thing? I don't get that. In the transportation area, Bruce, I think, alluded to the absolutely ridiculous idea of spending more money to build wider freeways. So they're going to widen I-5 to, I think it's 8 lanes in each direction in the next like 5 years or so, I guess the plan is. So what, 10 years from now, we're going to widen it to 20 lanes, and then 40, and 80? I mean, it's just ridiculous to continue to spend money building freeways. We'll have to put up with traffic jams and that sort of thing until mass transit is around. But to continue to invest in something that doesn't work and creates emissions, it seems to be pretty ridiculous. On other fronts, technology has made huge advances in many, many areas, including the advances in solar manufacturing that have reduced the costs. The built environment has been improved dramatically. Just today I was looking at some news, and IRS has approved additional investment tax credits for renewable and energy efficient investments. Electric cars have come a long, long way. There's a lot of things to be very positive about. Unfortunately, there's some things that, to my mind, are not so positive and things that we need to change. I personally am not completely convinced that whoever is elected mayor of San Diego is going to have a big difference in the rollout of these various plans and strategies and ideas in San Diego. I think it will go on without regard to who's elected. The political arena is extremely erratic, and unlike, or I should say, like every other political entity, the city of San Diego is strapped for cash. The state of California is strapped for cash. The federal government, no, they're in this stupid budget exercise that they go through before they approve additional debt. So I'm not looking to the government so much as some of the other speakers are. I think we have to look to ourselves and to do what you're continuing to do. Thank you.
Just to kick off, I want to thank you all for some really, I mean, don't you agree that was really compelling stuff in a very short period of time? Thank you all, and for your work, which each of you has done for a very long time and brought us, frankly, to the point of hope. We're at a point of hope again, and we haven't lost our hope in San Diego, but I wanted to ask whomever would like to, well, I want to make a statement about this event, as modest as it is here. We're not a political club, we're just an ad hoc group of really, really smart people. And I want you to know that I invited Nathan Fletcher 3 times on my own through their designated portal, which is their website. I invited him first and early. I invited him a 4th time through a insider volunteer. And I finally, this isn't really my style, I invited him the 5th time on Voice of San Diego, along with Mr. Falconer, who I called his office twice. I got no response. Now, I just want to contrast, this is just the facts, to what happened with Mr. Alvarez and Mr. Coons. And I also heard from Mike McGarry yesterday, but we were locked down, and he was fine with that, but agenda-wise. But David Alvarez's folks said yes immediately, and that was that. And he showed up, and that was that, and he appeared, making my life very easy. Mr. Coons, basically the same situation. A little rough at first, but they were getting started, and Elena got back to me, and I asked Bruce, I said, gosh, I've invited you, are you coming? And he said, absolutely, I'm sorry for the delay, and he's here. I just want to state that my experience has been, and I've done events in Washington, D.C., co-hosted with the United States Senate and my organization, that no matter what the topic is, generally the people who come, including our panelists this evening and yourselves, are the ones who are really committed. Now, this is not science. This is just a practitioner's observation. Therefore, here's my question. Are any of you concerned, and if you are, would you like to state it publicly tonight, that if some of the folks who chose not to reply tonight, are we in danger if we get the wrong strong mayor in office of losing the momentum and the hope on these specific projects and the general thrust? Or do you think it's just a marketplace phenomenon that's going to go forward, pretty much whoever's elected based on, you know, whoever the top 5 are? I've lost track of their top 5. And I don't blame you for not answering, Nicole. but I welcome your views too.
My wife would say that I'm pulling this from out of my kole, which is a Hawaiian word for what I'm sitting on. But one thing I don't like, and I'm going to preface this by saying I am a fiscal conservative. I'm an independent, so I'm not a Democrat. I'm a fiscal conservative. Socially, I'm a liberal. Fiscally, I'm conservative. What I don't like is that in my experience, Republicans have sort of given this a bye and have not bothered to come to environmental community events, environmental events. I don't get it. I am a business person. I'm an entrepreneur. I make my living in business. There's nothing more capitalist than Wall Street, which is, you know, my arena, and yet green is good for green. So I have no knowledge of what a Republican candidate is thinking. I'm just saying generally I wish they were involved in this sort of thing. That's just something I'm pulling that out.
I'm very encouraged that the interim mayor is so keen on pursuing these policies. I didn't expect that to happen, and this is very uplifting. That's it.
Well, I guess my only point would be that you have to think beyond who the current elected official is or will be, because if you're truly committed to your vision, then you just move your agenda forward no matter what. I've been in this struggle for, like I said, it's probably been over 15 years. I'm gonna have to count, but so obviously we've mostly experienced Republican, pretty, really conservative, especially on the environmental front, mayors. And yet that didn't change anything about how I lobbied or what my vision was or what the agenda was. So I think, worst case scenario, I would still be advocating for the same cause. I'd still be pushing for the climate plan and trying to get that, it'd be a hand, whatever, no woman, but a hand to implement the strategies and the targets. So for me, as disappointed and disheartened as I would be if we took a step backwards, it wouldn't stop me from trying to push that person forward.
So this is when I always point out there was a Republican that created the Environmental Protection Agency. We have seen such an incredible shift in political belief structures in this country in the last 30, 40 years. And so what you have are people running as one, I think the Republicans are concerned, or I guess one of them is no longer Republican, that if they look too green, it will be, then they're lefty and liberal and, they're way out there. And I think that we do have to be concerned about who gets in office by looking at what they promised to get there. And the fact that they're not here, not that they, people would come here and make any promises. We didn't ask, the speakers to make any promises, but that they don't even want to engage is really very troubling and very concerning. But sadly, not at all surprising given the political divide that we've seen on environment. And what I used to say when I was on resources and in other committees is business likes certainty. In order to invest, you have to have some certainty in your investment. That's why people like the United States. There is nothing more uncertain than what's going to happen with climate change. And you talk about, all this prime real estate suddenly being worthless. And I know a big point was made about the convention center. How can we build on tidelands when the tides are going to be covering those tidelands under Scripps projection? So I think if they don't listen, they're going to lose a really important perspective. And that's the way I would approach the conversations with them, is there are things about climate change that are going to impact businesses. Those who are addressing them are thriving, and those who aren't listening to it will not. And I don't know how to get those words in their ears if they're not willing to show up and be part of these events. But they need to be able to address it as leader of the 8th biggest city in the country.
I think it's one of the biggest tragedies of our time that sustainability is a political issue and not a social and human issue more. I do think that a positive mayor will have a better influence than a negative one, for sure, no question. I know that Mayor Filner had an aggressive posture, and Rob was working that business, and I don't know that his predecessor, who had certainly was an environmentally concerned individual, Mayor Sanders, he had an individual in charge of driving forward projects, but it wasn't a priority. And I think the real question is, whoever's elected, it needs to be a priority. And if it's not a priority, it won't get the support it needs.
Good. I feel like you guys down there, you're way down there. This is the big green table, but how about you and then Walt? I'm sorry, I still don't know your name, but we met, yes.
I am Kara Liederman. I actually sit with a bunch of these people on the Sierra Club. I'm the vice chair. So thank you guys for your very smart, insightful answers. I'm definitely learning a lot from you right now. Is this on? Okay. This is just more food for thought. About a year ago, I saw Jane Goodall speak how many people are familiar with her philosophy. It's very cool, actually, and I was wondering thoughts, because there are two things that stood out for me when you guys were speaking as a panel, and it was clear messaging and money. And right away I thought of Jane Goodall, because the work that she does in philanthropy and her message is very, very clear. And what she did, which is something that could be a possible model, because it addresses ecotourism, it addresses sustainability, overpopulation. She somehow has the answers for everything, and she's the UN World Peace Leader, I believe, Peace Ambassador. So she has some good thoughts. I was wondering what your thoughts were about going a different direction instead of going right to the layer of solar panels. What if the angle was a little bit different to get more conservatives on board, of going through ecotourism first, which could bring in the money as a first layer, and then once we have the money, then we bring in the second layer where it's more sustainable infrastructure and solar panels. I was just curious of your thoughts.
Go ahead and shout it out.
Run down
Ecotourism is definitely a growing field, but let's just look at tourism in San Diego per se. The wages for the people that are supporting the tourism industry are abysmal. And San Diego, in fact, has done an excellent job of developing tourism and service sectors, but if you look at the hourglass of wages, we have this big bubble at the bottom of the hourglass of low-wage jobs in tourism and service, hospitality, and then a very skinny middle class, and then a bubble at the top of very high-tech, sector, well-paying jobs. The problem is with tourism in San Diego, most of those jobs just don't pay very well. And when we invest in that as a government policy, and we build hotels and we build convention centers, one of the fights has been, let's make sure the people who work there and make the beds and prepare the food and clean the rooms are being paid a living wage in San Diego. So when we talk about people wanting to come here, and they do, I mean, all you have to do is go down to La Jolla Shores on a busy weekend and see this flotilla of kayaks, and these are people from all over the world coming here because they appreciate the kelp and the bicyclists. I mean, we have a thriving eco/tourism industry, but it hasn't been structured in a way that it's really contributing and this goes back to what I said about a biological inventory. If we really value what we have here and did a better job of protecting it, and then we charged accordingly, the hotel tax goes to private businesses. They voted to put a tax on themselves, and they control that money. So tourism, per se, the way the dollars are structured in San Diego, is not going to help us financially as much as we would like. But it certainly does help people appreciate the wonders that are San Diego and make them want to come and live here, which drives up housing prices, and don't get me started on that. So, anybody have good news on the ecotourism side?
I have good news on the conservative side.
Okay.
That it really isn't a conservative green issue. When we were working on this CCA project, Lane and I, with Van, where Van is, Collingwood.
Moved over here.
Oh, okay. But the two strongest candidates to start community choice aggregation are Santee, which is probably considered, if not the most conservative or libertarian city in the county, close, and Solana Beach, which is pretty much the opposite. It seems to be more of a don't tread on me type issue, that people just want the utility off their back, and they take any reasonable alternative to that. So, I mean, that's the good news. I mean, there's plenty of conservatives that would jump on board. And just one final comment, anyone know who Roger Hedgecock is? I was on the Roger Hedgecock show a few years ago with San Diego Gas and Electric VP. Not long before that, Roger had covered his house with solar panels. He was producing more than he was using, and they weren't paying him a dime. And so I was amazed that it turned out to be me and Roger beating up on SDG&E for shortchanging Roger. So it's not conservative liberal.
So, just a small side point is I'm here, my affiliation is Hydrogen Fuel Cell Institute, that's my hat. So I went solar 10 years ago, and as soon as I was trying to build an electric car, and as soon as one came out, I bought it. I have a thing about, I'm a little bit of a libertarian, and I have a thing about sending my money to countries that hate America. I hate that idea. So I really, really wanted to not buy oil from overseas. I'm fiscally conservative, a little bit of a libertarian. And I love the fact that I make my own energy, and I don't buy oil. And we have 2 cars now, my wife and myself and our son. We drive solar-powered cars. And our cars aren't slow like a BMW. They're not, it's not slow like a Porsche. It's a fast car. And I don't see, I think SDG&E should love this, because I'm not spending $2,500 a year on gasoline. I'm giving a lot of money to SDG&E, but the point is I'm not buying oil from overseas. I don't see why that doesn't really appeal to other conservatives, so that's fine.
Great. You guys can hang on to the magic power stick. And Walt was next, and then we'll keep going. We have time. And then Don. You're okay.
Hi, Walt Meyer. I'm mainly here as a concerned citizen, freelance writer. I do stuff with United Green, but I'm very supportive of Bill and Lane's efforts and all the stuff that's going on. Alan, you and earlier Bruce alluded to why are we spending all this money building more freeway lanes, and 5 or 7 years ago I had an opportunity to talk to one of the top Caltrans people for San Diego, and they were expanding the 15 and said, why are we doing this when all we're going to do is add cars, traffic, whatever? And he said, well, first of all, it's not my decision. I get a mandate and I'm told what to do. But secondly, that the amount of money, and I'm sort of making up these figures here, but the amount of money that they spend to add a lane to the 15 or 2 lanes, whatever it was 1/10 or 1/20th of what it would cost to put light rail, even a limited version going up the 15. And that lane they added to the 15 would serve X number of people, and yet all their surveys say public transport would serve 1/10 that many or 1/20th that many. And so from a governmental bang for the buck benefiting the public thing, they could not begin to justify building public transportation versus adding a lane cost per person benefited. And so it seems to me that we need a different mindset that would get people at Escondido or Poway or wherever to use that before we can say, let's stop building freeways and let's start building some other.
Well, yes, kind of what you first, the chicken or the egg question. Because as long as they keep adding lanes, the people who,
as long as you keep adding lanes, the people who are driving will continue to drive. What would happen is if they get on the freeway and it takes 5 days to get to San Diego, they'll start taking the train.
Well, and the other thing that's not factored into those calculations on highway miles, and I'll just say first off that the building trades and the labor unions, they love those jobs. They say it's jobs, jobs, jobs. When we had our economic meltdown, where do they want to put all that money? Is into construction jobs, widening freeways, putting people, and I raised my hand and said, you're mostly putting men to work here. A lot of teachers would love to have that money too to educate people in the long run. But what they're not calculating in is where do those cars go when they get to the end of the line? There's also parking. And this is where Mike Bullock, who's on the Sierra Club Transportation Committee, is saying we have to unbundle parking from our employers. I know Qualcomm is being discussed as doing this. What is the value of the land where we're putting all those cars once they get to their destination? I think if, again, we did a true cost analysis, not just of the widening of the roads, but where do the cars go once they get there, then we start seeing the real, true value of getting people out of their cars. Well, right, yeah. But I'm just saying in terms of the building side, in terms of constructing things, we're not factoring in the cost of constructing parking and all these other things at the end of wherever people wind up when they get there. And I think that that's a false economy that makes it, that kind of cooks the books a little bit.
I'm not arguing for that. I'm just saying that was his point, was that, and a lot of taxpayers would just look at it from that point of view of saying, what's the bang for my buck for the most people if light rail versus we add 16 zillion more lanes to the pot.
And you look at a place like Sacramento where I spent 6 years, and light rail makes that city function smoothly. You don't have nearly the problems. It's obviously a smaller region, but it's growing fast, and a lot of light rail, and it makes a lot of sense to get there early instead of playing catch up like we are in LA and San Diego.
Okay, and I'm not hovering over you, Lori, just you got
I probably don't need a microphone.
Don, and then we had a gentleman over here with the hand. Thank you.
Rob brought up the fact that Germany leads the world in the installation of solar electric. Question is that because Germany has a feed-in tariff that actually makes economic sense to all stakeholders? Thank you.
Anyone who's following Angela Merkel just won, which to those of us who are in favor of the, I'll say it wrong, energy Wien, the energy turn they're doing in Germany, Atomkraft Nein Danke, no more nukes. They're going to wind and solar big time, and she's in favor of it. And she's a former East German physicist. You know, she's not necessarily a warm tree hugging.
And back to Kara's point about ecotourism, they actually converted their old dirty energy infrastructure into ecotourism places people go to look at. Haha, look what East Germany was doing, digging coal up out of the ground, and now we have wind power all over these places. So they're actually making money off of these decommissioned old dirty energy plants. If we could make money off of decommissioned San Onofre as ecotourism, I'd be all for that.
Somebody might want to give a short definition of feed-in tariff. I imagine not everybody knows what that is.
Go ahead, Pete.
I would defer to Don or Bill. Or
Go ahead, Pete.
Might be glad to give my definition. It's pretty straightforward. You get paid for what you produce without getting brain damage working things out with the utility. So, okay, so the short story, it has to make economic sense. It has to be a price point that makes economic sense. SB 32, my understanding, recently cleared the California legislature. I think it got signed off by the governor. It's at 9 cents a kilowatt hour. It's not a high enough price point that makes sense. Los Angeles Water and Power, City of Palo Alto have a price point. I think LA's is around 17 cents. That works. So if you do full cost accounting on what it takes to build a peaker power plant, what it takes to build transmission lines, the last one was like a $200 billion or $2 billion extension cord to get the power from where it's generated to where it's used. Well, if you factor all that stuff in, you can pay a little bit more to the people to produce power on their own, to get paid for it. Germany, my understanding, over 50% of their renewable energy is generated by its citizens. In SDG&E service territory, my understanding is like 3% is generated by its citizens, and that's mostly net energy metering, which is on-site metering that doesn't get fed into the grid. So if we're going to move this forward big time, I think we need a feed-in tariff that does make sense for the citizens.
Let me add something to what Don said. It was the city of Palo Alto, if I recall right, that offered 11 or 12 cents. They got 0 takers. When LA came in, they had to offer something like 17 cents. So around 14, it has to be north of 14, 15 to make sense. But something that Don said is important. Don will like this, I think, is that our system tends to favor the big, what she calls industrial solar and wind. Germany has a very different system where it's the small folks, the yous and me's, that are making half their power, and it's very much decentralized, which is, I think, I'm anticipating where you'll go in this. So it's a different, that EEG, it's called the EEG, was originally as high as like 72 cents. It was crazy high. And everybody was slapping in solar everywhere to take advantage, because for like next 10 or 20 years they could get money. They tried to do it in Italy and Spain. It was like bankrupting the Spanish. They had to do a clawback. So you can't have it too high. But Canada, Ontario has been trying to do it. Yeah, the feed-in tariff is very interesting. EEG in Germany.
Good. We had another question from an attendee down here.
Yeah, hi, I'm Daniel Wise, and I gotta confess, I've been on both sides of the meter. I was in solar thermal in 1978, and we rode that up until the Republicans, Jimmy Carter, put panels on the White House, Reagan took them off, so we're back to that political stance. But I also was a strategic analyst for St. Gas and Electric for about 10 years, and more on the gas side, but just following the corporate model. I just want to commend this group for the vision and the dedication to really looking at sustainability as a whole picture of our environmental needs. The part that I'm just focusing on is the solar part, where you're talking about infill distribution, Rob, and and the German, you were right there with the feed-in tariff. That concept has kind of been short-circuited through the Assembly bill process. We are looking at net metering as a stretched-out process in the next couple of years, recognizing that it needs the incentives of government, just like nuclear needed insurance liability from the federal government before any utility would ever build a power plant. So now with the economies of scale that we've reached, we're looking at an average of $5 to $6 a kilowatt installed in the state of California. So here in San Diego, it's more like around $4.50. So that's kudos. We have a competitive market. We have a viable market, but we're also hitting barriers. It's the soft costs that were mentioned. So please keep working on those strategies. The industry itself is looking at trying to pre-form, pre-assemble, anything we can do to shave labor costs, but still build quality conformity with the codes and things like that. So, and then the last thing, I just want to, again, keep your vision. Recognize too that sustainability also with solar systems as a micro grid component is also disaster preparedness. So when you saw New Jersey wiped out by floods, all those solar systems were sitting there not working because they were grid connected. So we know the batteries are not part of it, but fuel cells, those types of future where we need to look at storage with in-grid fill-in and sustainability, those go together. So sustainability, micro utility grids that are integrated with the main system. SDG&E is really a distributor. They're not a broker of the commodity, but they're gonna resist that until the bitter end. So that's why you had the Assembly bill versus feed-in tariffs. So anyway, I just appreciate hearing what I'm seeing and looking forward to.
And I'm gonna just kind of take a pause here for a minute. By the way, I want to point out that Paul and Run with the Sun, which is a campaign of the Sierra Club, which was a sponsor for us this time. We really appreciate that, and there's a lot of Sierra Club volunteers here tonight, so thank you so much. And I really want to urge you, we're going to take a quick break. We're on time. We're going to get out here early.
Before you take a quick break, I have a burning comment I'd really like to get out.
Hang on to it. Let me finish my burning comments and then
Well, I already lost out on Mr. Alvarez, so please.
Well, Van, I didn't know that. And I'm sorry, I think. I want you to get that burning comment out because we're not done yet. We're going to take a break after you're...
Well, yeah, but you're going to a different panel next. So
I'm going to let you speak with this panel before we break.
I'm sorry?
We've been in political offices together. I'm with you, man. I haven't talked to so we're my brother. But I do want to urge people to come back because Donna Tisdale has, for two very important reasons. Donna has brought a presentation on what I will call, I take responsibility for this, the unintended consequences that are being experienced by credible people in East County who are sustainability advocates, at least the one I met. Now, you and I just met tonight, but I'm going to assume that you're not anti-sustainability. Big assumption. Secondly, I really want us to be able to hear, and this relates to the feed-in tariff, to hear about what, again, I'm going to capture as fast-tracking CCA. You put it more eloquently to me by email, but it's very important that we hear this tonight. So after Van talks with the panel a little bit, then we'll take like a 10-minute break, come back by no later than 8:15, and I'm really looking forward to hearing both of these folks speak. So, Van, please.
Thank you.
Certainly.
I just wanted to put a wrap on what you guys covered, because you started off talking about technology, and you moved into the political arena, talked about feed-in tariff. One of the questions that I don't expect you to answer is, what was the political landscape in Germany that allowed a successful feed-in tariff to go forward? And what's the difference between the German democracy and the American democracy that keeps us from being able to move forward here on things that just make common sense? And what it comes down to, for me at least, is all of us in this room, including myself, I think need to do a better job in terms of holding our elected officials accountable. And not just at election time, but in between elections, every day. using all the political tools that we have available, whether it's commenting, showing up at hearings, showing up at events like this, or using a land use attorney or a team of attorneys when you can't prevail in terms of common sense. And I know Don is doing that, which I appreciate. So there's just, for me, and I guess an example of this tonight, and part of why I wanted to get this out, was we have David Alvarez here, promising young council member. Looks like he's rounding up a lot of support for mayor, and quite very well could be the next mayor. But I didn't see us asking him one tough question here tonight, and I wish he was here so I could ask him this and let him represent himself and answer this on his own. So instead, he's going to have to hear it secondhand. But basically, Mr. Alvarez just voted in favor of a project that had significant unmitigated greenhouse gas effects. It was a project that violated the city's own hillside or environmentally sensitive lands ordinance, invasive hillsides. It had 4 times the density over the zoning in a sprawl project. So basically what happened was, in terms of the practicality of the issue, is we had somebody who, I was under the impression as a friend of the environmental community, somebody that I'd like to jump on the bandwagon with. But when it came time to choose between a developer or the environment, chose the developer. And it wasn't just that he voted in favor of the project, he seconded the motion. He seconded the motion. So, I would like to be able to ask him that personally and allow him to address all of you on that particular issue. And also on the vote that he's going to have to take coming up on Brownfield. How does a massive airport project do anything to help us on climate action? So these are tough issues. He's got a tough job, but it comes back to, I think we all need to do a better job on holding people accountable and not allowing people that we feel are in our corner. And I'm sure because of David's record with LCV, which is, it's got very high marks, has been good, but not allow him to take us all for granted when at times, because frankly, I'm very disappointed in the Democratic leadership when it comes to the governor of this state and people like John Perez that gutted fracking bills. And so it comes back to what one of you said, I think, is some of the best environmental results we've had is when we had a Republican executive in a Democratic legislature.
Okay,
And there's
well,
split power.
Since Lori endorsed, would you like to answer that? And then I'd like to have Pete answer a question related to that, which is there an opportunity for Van, who I believe is a Sierra Club member, I believe you are?
Yes.
Yes, to address that through the process that Sierra Club is doing for the October forum? Because you didn't get a chance tonight.
So are you asking me now, or are you going to Lori?
Well, let's go to Lori first, but then I'd like you to.
Lori's in charge, she's the chair, right?
Pardon me?
I said Lori's in charge, she's the chair.
Well, I actually was going to address Germany.
That was
a very
easier.
long question, but I was trying to take this in chronological order of your question, because I was in Germany several years ago when they were just starting to ramp up their energy, and I met with some of the national leaders, and I was going to say, I think the difference is, not to make fun of it, but they really do work in a very starkly different way than politics in the United States. There are many different parties, including a Green Party. And when we went into the Reichstag, and we went up to the top floor and we were looking at the party offices, there was a Green Party alongside the Social Democrats and those other groups. They are not as hardened into two camps that are more about thwarting the action. They're about actually, they have to cooperate. And that their form of government requires coalition building. They don't have a supermajority of any one party. So they have to bring in the Green Party in order to get a majority to be able to elect their prime minister. So there's a lot of cooperation going on there. They also have a bar on the top floor of the right side. No, seriously, I mean, there's a lot more socializing and I shouldn't say comradeship, but there's a lot of good camaraderie, that's the word I was looking for. There's a lot of camaraderie, and you don't see that here. And the fact that we didn't get some of those candidates here shows that they're not even willing to engage in the conversation. They don't have to say, I'm gonna do this or do that, just come and talk to us, and they chose not to. So that's, they cooperated, they came up with solutions, they had a very high subsidy, we're talking about the feed-in tariff, they had a very high subsidy initially. As they got the people to come in, the subsidies came down and they hit that sweet spot, which is why they were able to do what they've done. And they're also very technology savvy and very big on their own manufacturing. We try to attract people to California to build panels, and they go across the border into Mexico because labor costs are cheaper. So there's a lot of small and big factors, political and labor factors, that made it possible for Germany to do what they did. But that camaraderie in the political landscape helped a lot. And I'll let the others questions.
I thought this might be a good time for an advertisement for your event, for what, maybe not.
No, it's not, we're not really advertising it per se.
But for Sierra Club.
Right.
Since we have, a stalwart.
Well, there are a lot of Sierra Club members here,
yes,
including Van. If you're unhappy with him, I invited him, just so you know.
Yeah.
No, I'm just saying, Van, from what I know as a Sierra Club member who's working with Pete on this event, is that there's an opportunity to get that specific question in, I think. But he's the decider, he's the organizer of that event, so I just wanted to point you in that direction because you were unhappy that you didn't get to ask it tonight. That's all. So with that, I really look forward to seeing you all back in about 10 minutes. It's now 8:14. And come back at, that would be 8:25 or 8:24. And I think you'll really